Thanks for tuning into this episode of FinTech Focus TV, powered by Harrington Starr, the global leaders in financial technology recruitment. Head over to the Harrington Starr website where you'll be able to find all the latest jobs in financial technology across the globe. You'll also be able to download the latest issue of the Financial Technologist magazine, including the Top 1% Workplace Awards. Finally, if you're looking to grow your team, please get in touch. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to our episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby. I am here today in the studio with Mike and Adrian from AbbeyCross. Guys, it's lovely having you in.
Thanks very much for having us. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So we've just been having a great conversation about the journey you guys have been on over the last couple of years, and finding out a lot about the business and where you're heading, and recently raised a seed round and everything after that. So we've got loads and loads to get into today. You're doing something pretty revolutionary with the business as well, which I'm excited to get into. Before we get into all of that, let's do the usual. Sure. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and the company.
Adrian, why don't you kick it off?
Well, I have a background where I started as a lawyer. I spent the first half of my career as a lawyer, and
more and more people I'm hearing have gone through that pathway.
No, I think it's the horror. So I jumped the fence about halfway through my career and joined the Royal Bank of Scotland, which is where I met Mike. So that was a good, 12, 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
By chance ended up supporting Mike and his team. He pretty quickly invited me to come down and join the front office, which I did, and sort of forgot about the law altogether. And so I've been doing that ever since, and really unplanned as it was, but by chance I fell into foreign exchange and payments, and that was working in the markets division at RBS, facing transaction banking, so risk management and pricing for payments, trade finance, all of that sort of piping stuff. From there went to BNP Paribas, the French bank, and have done a bit of work across FinTech, 2 or 3 different FinTechs in advisory roles before founding AbbeyCross with Mike.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it's amazing. 15 years about, right? It's a long time since we met. Double-edged sword, perhaps, for you?
Yes.
What might have been.
Anyway, exactly. But that's right, yeah. Adrian and I met at RBS. I got into banking quite late in life. It was my third career, basically. Marketing and technology were the 2 things I did first. And got involved in, much like Adrian, payments and foreign exchange. Well, not by design, it sort of just emerged in my life. I spent 7 years at RBS, went to HSBC for a short time before leaving to go to Bank of America, where I was in charge of the market risk end of their cross-border payments business for 10 years. Grew that up from something significant to something really big. And I guess that journey is what led us to where we are now, really. And then in terms of the founding friendship piece of it, just knowing each other, trusting each other through friendships, and recognizing complementary skill sets. We're very different, but we see a lot of the world the same way, which helps, but we don't approach it the same way, which is very useful, I think.
And that was never the sort of design to say, right, we're here and we're besties, we're going to start a business up.
No, it wasn't really that. I mean, personally for me, as I said to you before, there was probably only 2 people in the world I would ever do this with.
Yeah.
And Adrian, fortunately, is one of them. So be clear on that. And so, that was it. It was not so much the besties thing. Yeah. It was more, we always felt that there was this problem which we were all living with that we could solve. And we've been playing with it a bit over the years. And I suspect COVID had something to us looking at it more deeply. I've never really thought about it in that lens too much. But there was something there around the timing, wouldn't you say?
I would. And in fact, I'd go further around did we do this because we were friends? We actually spent quite a bit of time thinking about whether that was a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. That we were close mates. And we worked sort of through that before we decided to do it. Is this actually wise?
And what gave you the confidence to do that? Because I do think that's a really important part of the founders piece, because you can have people there who've got their creative difference, which then drives the innovation. You can have people there who are too similar, which then creates that sort of thing, and saying, do you want to risk the friendship or whatever it may be. What gave you the confidence that actually this is something which we can do?
Well, on that smaller point, Mike can perhaps address the business problem that we're looking at, which we had a real conviction about, and Mike can explain that. But on the friendship point, I think once we knew each other very well, both professionally and personally. Yeah. So we worked together, so we knew how each other reacted and performed in a work environment under pressure. But we'd also spent quite a bit of time together on holidays and doing things outside of work with our families. And so we knew each other sort of pretty much inside out. And so, you know, at that point, you kind of have a sense of someone's values, you have a sense of someone's reliability and trustworthiness and you know, how they handle difficult situations. So I think that's what gave us the confidence to actually do this as a founding team.
And spoke about it though. We were intentional about that discussion, as you said. You know, we spoke about that, and I think if I would just boil it down to one word, trust.
Yeah.
You know, that's a huge factor in life.
And this came through from the idea that, and I think you said before we came on air, that this was something where actually starting the company probably wasn't the first way that you looked at with the problem. It was a problem which you saw in emerging markets, and an opportunity to say, right, can we do that within the banks which you were working with beforehand? Frustrated within that, then the business idea gets born. Talk to us about that journey.
Well, let's frame the problem quickly, and then we'll work into how we looked at it initially. Because you know, there was a long journey of validation when you know in life you think, this is really a problem. I wonder if it's just me, and then you discover, you know, through a validation process, it's not just you. The essence of it is, for the last 20 odd years, all banks in the world that manage a full suite of currencies for payment purposes. Have pretty much all of them outsourced the FX and settlement, the payment end of an FX trade for payments to a vendor. And the important point there is they've pretty much all used just the same vendor. That's a real problem. And it's a problem because
you see it so often as well, don't we?
Oh, it's not an infrequent thing. You certainly see it in other areas, but in the banking context, the problem with having one vendor, beyond the obvious continuity risk, because it takes you over a year to onboard a new vendor, right? So if they fall over or they can't do a specific currency, what's plan B? That's a problem. But when you have one vendor giving you one price for one currency, it's pretty much take it or leave it. And we all understand the economics of life, that when there's no competition, you know, as the phrase, where there's mystery, there's margin, right? And there's an FX thing. And so ultimately, that's a reality of what was happening in banks. And there's an acknowledged problem there. And so we were living with that and trying to work out what the alternative was. And there wasn't an alternative that didn't require you to go and onboard 3 or 4 or 5 other vendors, which is expensive, and banks, frankly, budgets don't allow for it all the time. And then the other issue that arises from that is because you only have one vendor and banks are required to at least show the regulators and their customers that they're pricing fairly. How do you do that? You have a price point which is itself skewed because the cost of settlement, physical settlement of the cash, is loaded into the spread. So it's already skewed. And you can take that one price, skewed as it is, and compare it to, let's say, a rate on a Bloomberg or a Refinitiv screen, Reuters screen. They never match. So how do you actually justify this? And that was a problem that we were all living with. And I was living with it at the head of the desk and signing off, you know, literally hundreds of off-market reports in this context of, well, I can't really prove this is right or wrong. So that's the problem we were seeking to solve, and we'll get into how we solved it. But in taking that problem and a potential solution to our own bank and other banks, what we discovered was there was obviously the consortium play, but consortiums take years to stand up, and they, by definition, are somewhat constrictive in the nature of what they are. Speaking earlier on about, you know, institutions doing podcasts with you, those same problems exist in banks too. And the knowledge, the suggestion we eventually got from somebody senior in the firm who would have been in charge of the funding and innovation part of this consortium said, just take it outside the bank. We'll work with you if it works. So go and get funding and show us that it can work, and you'll most likely find a lot of interest. Turns out she was right. That's what happened. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We went through a period of market validation. We took the idea to our peers at 7, 8 of the biggest banks in the world. And more actually. Yeah. And, you know, as one, you know, they all recognised the problem. And we were in the fortunate position, you know, because of our background in the market, to be able to get heard, get meetings, and get listened to by the right people. You know, it's a massive advantage, of course, but the idea still has to have merit, you know. And as one, they sort of said, yes, recognise this problem. Sometimes there'd be just laughter, you know, open laughter when we'd mention it, you know, because it was such a problem for them. They recognised it immediately. And we sort of sketched out a solution and said, if this was, you know, if we built this, would you be interested? And, you know, 7 or 8 of them actually pretty promptly signed letters of intent saying, if you build this, you know, we will test it. And if we test it and it works, we will use it.
Fantastic. So that gives you that sort of immediate impact, Emil, because as you said, look, there's a widespread issue with startups in the financial services space, with banks as customers being able to sort of get through that sort of process. And we know the it's not an easy gig to sell to banks, particularly in those sort of track record and in that startup sort of phase. And it's the stranglehold, the procurement stranglehold that kills so many businesses at the start.
Yeah.
You've got that validation before you actually kick off as a business. You've got people there who are recognising I love the mystery margin line. I'm sort of trying to mentally keep that in my head. But you see this sort of thing saying, right, okay, this is something which we've got here. But there are so many founders who've come up with that, who've got to that sort of phase, who then quite simply run out of cash before that sort of area, before people have actually been able to buy and sign up with all that sort of basis around it. So you guys have bucked the trend on that and have been able to sort of open up the banks and create that. Talk to us, demystify that for us.
Well, let's not turn this into an Alice in Wonderland story. There's still a heavy lift, okay? But it starts with having a commercial partner that recognizes a real problem, and recognizes that your solution is pragmatic enough to work. The reality of it is the optimal solution can't be used by a bank in their current form. There's no bank we've seen that can actually use the optimal solution just yet. So you need to find a pragmatic way to step into their world. People, and in raising money, we heard this a lot from VCs. It's so hard to sell to banks. We've backed businesses that couldn't do it. I think the fortunate issue is that Adrian and I, with our perhaps more advanced years in the spectrum of founders, have worked long in banks, so we understand how they function. Banks are not complicated. Banks are just relatively slow, very regulated, and by definition are very process-oriented. So understanding the process and being able to sort of pragmatically approach it is a significantly big advantage for us. And then appreciating the fact that, yes, if you're going to go through an onboarding with a large bank for procurement purposes, it is a 3, 6, 9 month process. You have to do that. The flip side to it, though, is if you have a good solution that's going to work for them, that becomes a moat, if you think about it that way. So there is a stickiness to that whole thing, which is pretty useful, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And we were very clear with our investment conversations about these challenges. Whether we were dealing with part of objection handling. We were told you can't sell to banks, but it was also partly we didn't want investors on board who had a sort of unrealistic idea of how fast this would go. And so we're really fortunate. We've got absolutely great venture capital investors. We had a bunch of angels when we kicked it off as well who understand this space. So we didn't make promises we couldn't keep. We were very, very clear about the challenges on the road ahead and how long it might take. And so we haven't been under pressure in the way some startups are who've promised they're going to change the world in the next 18 months. We never made that promise.
And nor did we get seduced by, the sexy new tech idea. You won't believe how many times we were approached by people with money that were linked to, tokenization, blockchains, cryptos, etc., saying, use our tech, it'll change things. At a intellectual level, you can absolutely see the value of a blockchain-style technology. I don't think that argument is there to be had anymore. That's not the question. It's the adoption of the technology. So this is the point. It's about recognizing that if you're going to solve the problem with a bank, you need to reduce the lift the bank has to have. It's got to be as light as possible, and it's got to be staged, because the reality is there are multi-year budgets. Like I said, the optimal solution may take 2 or 3 years for a bank to fully use, but there's certainly components of it early on that add real value that they can use from the very beginning. So it's recognizing that reality. So selling to banks, not complicated. Selling to banks requires experience and pragmatism.
I think that's so important, isn't it? Because everything you've just said there is wonderfully obvious in the best possible sense, right? So you're talking there about, and I guess this must help with your background in law at the same sort of time.
Definitely.
When we talk about the whole concept there of having the right sort of information ready before that sort of conversation is there, it's to me it seems that a lot of time is lost from people being surprised at the number of hoops they've got to jump through at various different phases, or whether they've got the right information ready at the right sort of time and all that sort of process. And I think when you're looking at companies like yourself who've been able to navigate that process, it's been clarity as well. And I'm so pleased you said that around having the right sort of venture money behind it, because we'll talk about this in shortly. But I think there's so many companies I've spoken to, and we know the sort of success rate of investment, and how perilous a process it is for both investor and founders to be taking money at that sort of stage. And so often it's about the sort of, I guess, the disparity between perception from both sides about what they're looking to do. Right? And it might be that the fact that that's because the founder team have needed that money and they've got into bed with the wrong people at the start. Or it might be that they haven't articulated with clarity about what the process is going to be and been really clear about who marries up. But I think this has to be a two-way process where you're interviewing the right people to invest in your business.
Absolutely.
As much as it is, I want a beauty parade. And we know, look, I've had VCs on the show who've had 2,000 people they've been speaking to or seen pitches from over the course of a year and picked 10. So we know that means that there's a lot of pressure on people to get that process right. But it comes back down to, I think, being absolutely focused about who you are and the skills that you guys can bring to those particular companies that allow you then to make it easy for the banks to buy from you, which is a critical part of it, but also have the right expectations all the way through the process as you come in there.
Well, no doubt you start that journey, speaking for the two of us, with this anxiety of, are you good enough to be funded?
Yeah.
And at that stage, there is a sense of anybody who'll fund me will take.
Yeah.
But you very quickly learn in the conversation that that's not a good approach.
Yeah.
True, right? We went through that.
True.
And then you start to appreciate that it's actually a two-way interview.
Yeah.
So you need to be clear on what you are and also what you're not.
Yeah.
And to be clear with people like that, that's how you start to get there, right? It's about matching these things. And so we certainly saw that in the beginning. And so as we went through, and we've raised twice now, I think that the learning curve for Adrian and myself, it's a cliche, but it's been somewhat vertical in terms of just what you learn and how this works out. And you also learn quickly to ask, what are the 5 important things I need to know about you as a VC before we even move into the next phase of me explaining what I'm doing? And you have a mental checkbox. Well, I write it down now, but literally what that is. And you quickly, well, this is not going to be a fit, so let me not waste each other's time. Let's have a quick chat and move on.
Yeah, because time is a big part of it.
It's always a factor, And if I think about last year, we raised to it, arguably the toughest, year to raise money in 10 years. Over 100 conversations probably in 3.5 months. New conversations. So these aren't the follow-ons. The follow-ons can add to that number. But you have to do that.
Kiss and frogs.
Absolutely. There's plenty of frogs in my house right now.
Well, we also actually kept it to FinTech VCs, didn't we?
Yeah.
We cast the net as narrowly as we could.
That's right,
Those still
B2B
found 100
FinTech.
people to speak to. But, we didn't go out and speak to people. One of the Mike's checklists he's talking about, and the first thing you do, of course, is look at the portfolio, the VC's portfolio. And they might have some fantastic stuff, but if it's all B2C, retail stuff or whatever, it's just not relevant to us. We know the conversation's going to be difficult because they're going to struggle to understand what we're doing. And because we had a real problem we were solving with a real solution, we really needed and wanted to get that across. Yeah. If you're talking to a VC, no disrespect or criticism intended, but if you're talking to someone without a background in this space who simply can't understand the problem, let alone the solution, well, you're sort of wasting both parties' time. Unless they're just a flyer on you.
Yeah, and even some people we spoke to, and Adrian, will attest to this, who I would describe as being from financial markets, even as far as being from foreign exchange in financial markets, doesn't understand this problem. And it's a really interesting dilemma because if you think about the world of banking, the volumes in FX trading in a normal bank, 90% skew towards alpha-seeking institutional style trading, all right? But the revenues from those same banks, 50% skewed towards the payment FX businesses. It's a very interesting situation there. So most of the budget and the arms race in technology is going to the pointy end because they're competing with funds, the BlackRocks, the PIMCOs, whereas the payments businesses tend to be almost a little bit provincially managed and in those businesses. So you talk to somebody who comes from, has been senior and well, started a fund from institutional spaces, you've got to educate them on the adjacency of the niche you're talking about here. So there's an interesting, even that. So you have to be very, you need to get to understand why this person would invest with you. In our pre-seed round, one of the individuals who backed us as the second VC into that round, I had a glass of wine with him after he had funded us, and I said, why did you back us? Just out of interest, why did you personally do this? He was very clear. He said, we don't really look so much at the horse or the jockey. We're very focused on the course they're running on. So he had a very clear narrative of what they were looking for. And it's platforms that once in a place become very useful and therefore sticky and aren't really removed unless you, in his words, piss off somebody very senior or become monopolistic. So that was very clear. So it really helps sort of frame the way you should think about who you seek when you talk to people.
It's so important. And as I say, it is the common factor between people who are successful and non-successful from everyone I've seen within that sort of area, is that marriage between the two parties. And it makes it so much easier as it moves further forward when everyone's there and on the same page with where it goes. And maybe that comes down to something which we were talking about beforehand. And I love what you were saying about the demographic of who you were in the room with the other day. Shall we say?
That's right.
When we talk about founder market fit, you're sort of sat there and at the right sort of stage of career, I think, to make this successful within that. FinTech's got so many different areas. I was at FinTech Connect, a big show at the Excel at the start of the end of last year, and it's a completely different demographic over there to what you see maybe at the Fix event or Trade Tech, which is more capital markets orientated. And I think this is there's something here about this sort of experience that comes in at various different phases.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about your experience over there and your recent dinner in New York. And
well, Adrian can speak to where we first heard the phrase "founder market fit," but just to sort of answer that, I was, I live in New York, as you know, and I was invited by the people, the bank where I leave my money, not the bank that invested, and I was one of 20 founders at this dinner, and I was easily 20 years older than anybody else, which was interesting in itself. And it also gave me, I was the diversity candidate, if you like, in that context. Because also, another fact I never mentioned to you, of the 20 people there, just quick question to you, how many do you think were female of those 20?
Well, we've if you just see over there, there's something which talks about the 19% list, which talks about 19% of people being female technologists within the space. I'd be amazed at founder level if there is anything more than that.
Okay, if you would be amazed, there were 17 women in this group.
Wow.
3 men. And I was the oldest one by a long way. And interestingly, it was a very broad swathe of businesses. So I left thinking, wow, I'm very encouraged. These ideas being funded, this is really amazing.
Yeah.
But the point about founder market fit, I think, where did we first hear the phrase?
Sam, I think, was it? Or...
It was somebody Sam introduced us to. I think one of the investors, the German investor we spoke to over that Thanksgiving dinner. But somebody said to us, you have amazing founder market fit because you've understood the market you're in. You've explained it to me as a somewhat layman. I can see how this would work. And I've worked with those working with banks. I can see how this is going to work. And so in that conversation, we began to see what was, to be fair with you, is too old a problem? Actually, no, this is a real advantage. We're not too old, we're very experienced, if you want to put a spin on it. And I think that's how we started to see this, right?
But I think that's so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like when you look at those sort of things and you say, right, what you're able to bring to the table. I think when particularly when times are tighter and people are looking at, they're looking to invest in people there who can really take things further forward and have that experience and energy to do that. And that sounds exactly how you guys have shaped up.
But not just that, it's also something you speak about a lot. It's not the fact that they're just investing in our experience. It's, I think, our experience coupled with the recognition of something real to solve.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I've got this cool idea around AI or crypto, and I'm going to build the tech and hope I find a problem for it. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there's that. There's also, in the bucket of experience, you would add the slightly hackneyed term network. Yeah. But that really matters. If you have a status within your industry, however modest, that you know your peers and your peers know you, and they trust that you know something about the topic. They will pick up the phone to take your call, or they'll have a beer with you, and they will hear you out. And we're in the fortunate position of being able to, if you look at the sort of the way we would segment our market, the smaller banks use bigger banks to make payments and so on and so forth. So the flow tends to funnel through, 10 global banks, and then there's a tier of banks below that. So we kind of know the people in the relevant seats at most of those banks, and we've been able to get the conversations. And that side of experience, that's how we got the letters of intent, that's how we got the sort of market validation. That's the aspect of experience I think has been a huge advantage. Can I sometimes reflect on what it would be like if you were 24 years old, you had a great idea,
and great tech,
change something in banks, who would you ring? Who would you ring?
And when that person you eventually reach calls somebody else, they will never have heard of you. So that's another big part of the network, at least.
Having the sponsors in.
Well, because naturally, it is the cliche, right? The fact that I know Adrian and we have a conversation and he then makes a call to you, you have a conversation with somebody else. Oh, I've heard of Adrian, he's doing something interesting. It just adds to the comfort of okay, this is a good bet for us.
I spoke to someone from a tier 1 once who said the significance of having multiple people, multiple stakeholders on your side was critical. And when you talk about that sort of thing, it makes absolute sense to me. And I was thinking as you were talking there about the importance of having those people that you could tap up at the start of it to say, look, we've got this idea, this is where we're going. That makes it super investable, right?
Yeah, well, it does. And then if you go back to last year, which was we raised, as you know, a seed round last year. It was a task that started in January and concludes in November. I mean, I won't lie when I say there were some moments and times during that year which was, the anxiety was ratcheted up pretty high. So even even with a great network, even with a great product, last year was tough to raise money. As we feel good about getting it done, and we feel particularly good about it getting it done with at least one strategic bank who also is working with us commercially. That was a significant part of it. But the journey of doing that was again, from an education perspective, in the context of our life experiences, another layer of something really interesting that we'll always have with us, I think, in learning, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would. I just want to add one thing, because it's really relevant to what you guys do, about this network effect and experience and expertise. And that is that it doesn't stop with Mike and I. We hire very carefully. We're still fortunate in that we're still a small organisation. So we're really yet to have hired anyone that one of us hasn't directly worked with. So we know what we're getting, right? Or one of us
that matters, yeah, sure.
And just to give you an example of that, and just how important this is, that is that our CTO, when we hired our CTO, we then had off the back of announcing him, we had an inbound inquiry from a global tier 1 bank who is now working with us. They reached out and said, hey, why have you hired Ben? We wanted to hire Ben. So what are you doing? And so it's not just us. Just to be clear.
Yeah, it really matters. It does matter. Yeah.
We talk about talent magnets, and when you've got a business there that can sort of attract people from the network, and that continues to move out, it means you're doing something right. And people are attracted at the moment to solving great problems. And if you articulate that.
Yeah, and then getting that talent on board, they have to believe the idea as well, because look, you're still a founding business, and if you're attracting talent from within the institutional space, they're well paid. And it's one thing to say, oh, I'd love to be in a startup, wouldn't it be funky and sexy and fun? And then there's the reality of it's lean. That when I get on an airplane, I turn right, not left. And I was jokingly saying to somebody at a US investment bank recently, if I send an email out, invariably that email comes back to me. In my old world, I would send it out to somebody else and things would happen. So I think we as much as part of doing the work as orchestrating it, if you see what I'm saying.
Which makes it fun. I mean, we talked about this as well beforehand, and you touched on the anxiety aspect before. I've had a number of different conversations over the last 2 weeks, this year so far. So we're filming this at the end of January. I'm really enthused about who I'm speaking to at the moment. So these are people there who've been invested into, and I had someone who just done a $25 million pound Series A.
Nice.
Last week, and very, very chilled out Kiwi, and chatting through all of this sort of stuff, and he talked about this sort of strain of where that got to just before, as he was flying out back home for Christmas.
Yes, sure.
Going down to being sat there in an airport from Thailand, and then 12 hours later finding out with the deal from going south to then turning into or he got the good news.
It resonates. It resonates. It does resonate.
Go through all this, and it's the beautiful thing is that I think at the moment you're seeing businesses that are good businesses getting funding. I think in 21, 22, you saw a lot of money going into businesses, which was like, right, let's just back in and go for it. Sure. Right now, it means that if you, in my mind, if you're getting backing, it means you're doing the right things with the right people. But at the same time, processes that were taking 3 months are suddenly taking 9 months.
That's right.
And that 9 months takes an awful lot of work. You talked about 100 frogs to kiss, but you also talk about is it here, is it there, is it not going to be there, the paperwork, is it going to get over the line, is there something here that turns the deal upside down, all those different sort of things. So, you've had in 2021, 22, you had a pre-seed round.
That's right.
For what, $2.5 million?
$2.5 million, yeah.
This time out, congratulations, in November it was $6.5 million.
That's right, yeah.
With a really stellar lineup. I was looking at who's involved in that. It's, great validation again to get involved in it all. Talk to us a little bit about that sort of journey that you guys have had from the difference between pre-seed in the boom times going to seed funding in a more challenging time, should we say, to do it. And what can we take away from that?
I've often thought about how to answer a question like this, having gone through it with Adrian. Yes, they were very different times, and you're raising different amounts, and you have a different story to tell. Your pre-seed narrative is different to your seed narrative, so there's that factor. You've moved down the track more. You've gone beyond 2 guys, an idea, and a slide deck, to some people, a proof of concept, and something else. So there's certainly a different thing, wouldn't you say? That's different. The fact that we were already commercially engaged with some significant banking names opened up the doors to potential investment from those banks. So we went through a phase where by March we thought we were done. Look at us, we're great. Tough year. It's not tough, we're doing fine. And those bank grade names also invited interest from some, the premier level VCs out there. Who were, oh, are they doing? We're in. Okay, done. Stuff. That's what it's going to be. But that isn't what happened. Invariably, the climate that was tough for everybody was tough for the banks too. And the banks in question ended up not investing in anything last year. In those two, the banks we were dealing with. It wasn't about us. It was about they just weren't investing. And that, of course, spooked the premiers, the premier VCs are like, well, they're not. Is there something to be seen here we can't see? So you have to restart the process, which is tough. But then you're effectively, you can very much appear like damaged goods, even though you're not. That is the problem we went through. And so then what that looked like was a different level of suitor, fewer of them, and the market forces of demand and supply kick in. So now you're focusing on a longer diligence period, valuation challenges, and just more time, frankly. And we ended up in a situation where at the 11th and 11th plus hour, we ended up with a term sheet that we didn't love, but the powerful do what they want to and the weak do what they must, in a sense, right? But fortunately, we had also, and this is, I think, the part of the answer is, there's a degree of, if you're cycling up a hill, you've got to keep pushing the pedal. There's no way to get to the top other than push the pedal. It's not a romantic thing. You just have to do that. And in the process, we'd been lining up people who wanted to keep talking when we had a term sheet, and were reserving the right to see what they would do with that. And that's what happened. We ended up with this term sheet we didn't love, and then a VC who literally within the space of 3 days went from let's talk in depth to here's my term sheet. Exactly where we wanted to go with valuation, which was fantastic. So there was this, it wasn't an overnight success. It certainly wasn't, but it felt in that instance, wow, this happened so quickly. And so, I won't go into the rest of it, but we ended up like that. And for that felt like a validation of self-belief, of grinding it out, doing the stuff that doesn't look romantic, but actually matters. Keeping networks informed, updating people. And so that sort of up at dawn, work away at this for 8 hours a day, make sure you keep staying on this, and you're doing the right thing. You have the right product. You have a good team. These things are not changing just because nobody's saying yes to you. So you need to stay with that, don't you think? Yeah.
That's right. And just in case there's any ambiguity about what Mike said, the VCs that have invested have been extremely high quality, high-end VCs.
See, I've got a lawyer's apart.
They're watching. No, we're delighted with.
No, we absolutely are.
They're fantastic partners, right from pre-seed through to now. The guys who live.
Well, it's an impressive bunch, right?
No doubt.
Really high quality VCs and a big strategic in BNY Mellon.
Yeah, and just on that, the term sheet I was referring to, astonishing partner, really great partner, and the one that led the round, also a great partner. So we feel very blessed by the belief that these people have in us, and they come at it though from like you said before, an experience as well, where they're matching. We see something here which others perhaps can't see. Well, isn't that the whole point though? If you're investing, right? So.
I think it's really interesting that, when you talked about the very first thing we spoke about, I think when you first came through the doors today, was it's great fun. So I've been a startup guy pretty much my entire career, and it is there's loads of it. But you also said that there's a fine line between the two of it, as we were talking beforehand. And this is one of those areas where you get that sort of that sort of squeeze point within it, don't you? When you look at it, you like you say, you've got that belief, but it's always that sort of sense of somewhat doubt around it at the same sort of stage.
You're human.
Are people backing it? Do they see what we see in the whole thing? Can we get to that sort of phase? We know we're selling to the banks. We know we've got traction, etc., etc., and all of that sort of anxiety around it. You guys seem pretty relaxed at the same sort of stage with it.
You don't have to.
And that might be the camera face at the moment.
Well, maybe that's experience too. You realise there's things you can't change. So
that's it. And so it's not for everyone. This.
No, it's not.
Particularly coming from corporate environments.
No, it's not for everyone.
Careers that you guys have done. Sometimes it's that naivety that goes into a founder to say, right, okay, we can come into it, and there isn't that sort of fear. There isn't families that are involved in all that sort of stuff as well. The stakes aren't quite as high, at certain stages of career for it. talk to me about the balance of that fun and anxiety and how you guys keep grounded, and I guess that sort of friendship piece may well be the perfect part for that as well. To
it helps.
It definitely helps, and I think we probably it is a little bit of a tag team at time. I mean, there are times when, you know, because we've all got personal lives as well, right?
Yeah.
We've all got a lot going on in our lives outside of the business. So I think there have definitely been times where one of us has sort of tended to kind of be able to step into a gap because the other one, for whatever reason, you know, is not able to give their full attention to the business, or is dealing with one specific high stress aspect of the business. So there's that. But yes to all of that. The point.
But also, the ability to talk about that openly and frankly has been a big part of it. Yeah,
we do. My sort of wife occasionally jokes, I wish we had a marriage like yours and mine. You know, just because we're so deliberate about it, we have to be, because of the stresses of running a business together. We have to be very deliberate and have a sort of valve to let out the steam. And that just requires an agreement that we will be brutally honest with each other. Which we are.
Or just brutal.
but the other thing, the thing I'd really like to sort of draw out here is that one of the things, I don't know if this is a function of being relaxed or not, but one of the things that we've made a discipline of is that we're very transparent with the team as well. So when that amazing deal as it was shaping up in March fell apart, we were very clear with the team what had happened. We were very clear that, you know, actually all of our conversations had ended. We were very clear that we were now starting again from scratch, and they've got mortgages and they've got kids, and so we were very, very clear. We never sought to sort of shield them from any of that. And so there's a stress that filters down through the business, and we took the view that actually our honesty and our transparency with them actually gives a sort of strange sense of trust. So they do know what's going on, and they are able to make their own decisions. If the worst looked like it was on the horizon, they could take evasive action.
We're very intentional about the sustainable nature of these things. You know, when you start something new, of course you can dive in, you know, up to your armpits all the time. But then you also have to ask yourself and recognize that this is likely not going to be an overnight success, and you're going to have to sustainably manage the way you deal with each other, the way you deal with your people. So we worked very hard at that, and we speak very candidly about, you know, expectations on each other. And, you know, when are you off, when are you on? You know, for example, last year at Christmas time, we said we're closing the office. There's things that we could be doing, but we're not going to. Go home and enjoy yourself, you know. So I think that matters too, and that comes from experiences, knowing that, you know, you can walk down the hill rather than run down the hill sometimes, you know.
There's some discipline around all of that sort of stuff, and it feels like you've been very intentional about what you're doing and where you're going, and I love the story of where it's been so far, and, you know, congratulations. I don't think it's been easy for businesses to do what you guys have done over the last 2 years in particular. Let's sort of point a little bit more now towards the future. So, we were speaking off air about the sort of euphoria of raising, and then the sort of crash afterwards, and saying, right, we've done that, and now where do we go? And always thinking about the next thing. I think an entrepreneurial mindset is always about the next thing and what comes next and where do we go. And there's very little enjoying the moment and enjoying the milestones and the success in that sort of area. But I know there's big plans for what you want to do. So give us a bit of a view about what comes next.
Yeah, so you're right about that. It's analogous to sort of riding, you know, a bicycle up a series of hills. You crest the one, and then the next one is there, and you may enjoy the downhill, but you know what's coming, right? So, but you again intentionally got to put things in, celebrate these bits and pieces. We did that last year in November, and to answer your question, what that helped us frame was: here's the money. Let's make sure the plan makes sense, so we know where we're going with this. Be very intentional about the specific things that will satisfy the next phase of the business. Because to be cynical, these businesses require funding, and funding requires, you know, achieving specific KPIs, and being clear then on what you need to focus on. Because it's very easy to be, you know, distracted, wouldn't you say, into other things. And so to know that we have to achieve these 10 things, and these 20 things we're good to have as well. But let's be clear that these 10 are not negotiable. So we look at the world through, you know, an 18-month to a 2-year horizon, just through the funding cycles, because you typically raise for 18 to 24 months.
Yeah.
So we would have an A round in mind, and we have specific things we need to get
forward to it.
But actually, yes, in a way, because I do enjoy talking about the business.
Yeah,
I mean, they may come across, and so what I want looking forward to is getting close to a situation where you're not raising the money. Now you worry about people's lives because they attach to your mission, right?
Yeah.
So that's the part that's not enjoyable. But the raising part of it, I don't actually mind. I do enjoy it. It's just the anxiety that comes with it that sometimes is the issue. But I think we're very clear, aren't we, on what we need to build in the next, say, 18 months. we've made a great start at it. The team knows we're engaged in that. We're always tweaking with that, and the mission and vision sometimes changes a bit, but it's largely in the right direction. Wouldn't you say?
Yep, that's been our absolute focus. We had an offsite, once the round closed, and we set out very, very clear objectives, as Mike said. The other thing that's really interesting about Series A for us, and Mike said earlier that the first 2 rounds have been completely different, and we've learned a huge amount each time. Was our first rodeo. Both times, and it will be for Series A as well. But there is a sense too of with each of these rounds, and with the quality of the investors, and with the hitting those KPIs, we're seeing a real energy shift, aren't we? A lot of inbound interest from the investment community now.
Loads.
Sort of the sense of and that's another steep learning curve for us. How we manage that, and how we move towards Series A. That's equally new. If it continues, and if it doesn't, we have to deal with it. But there's an energy shift each time in our limited experience.
And that's true then of the customers and clients we work with as well. So there's an interesting. It's a little bit like you're adding more and more, water to the pot as it keeps simmering, and you're trying to keep that simmer point at the right level. And that's definitely happening for us. So we see, in this phase, us proving we have 3 very significant banks onboarding us at the moment, proving that to those banks that we are in fact a real value add to the way they manage their payments business, which we fundamentally believe we will be, and they're seeing that more and more. That narrative, once proven, changes what happens next. Because there is a degree of FOMO in everything around us, right? So if one large bank is using our facility to mitigate some key risks, and their peer isn't, the question that the peer is asking is, why aren't we looking at this? Yeah. So it's all about proving that what you said was there is in fact there, and it's not smoke and mirrors. And we are a long way down that track already, which is great. So we see a world, in the next 18 months where we prove that with our partners who are great in our network. We've got some great partner names in the network already, and the clients that are onboarding us. And then the next phase is, in essence, and it's not a cliche, but it's a scale of that model. It's also adding and building out some use cases that we know need to be solved in the future, but aren't critical now. Yeah. So there's a degree of absolutely right, because all large institutions and their partners have upstream and downstream problems of the problem we're solving. So solve that, earn the right to play, and then build out from there. I live in America, and there's that. Sometimes Americans use some interesting statements. So the chap was saying, I think he means there's a land and expand strategy. I said, well, not quite like that, but yes, I see where you're going with that. Yeah.
There's a lot of Americanisms I love. That's my favourite part about the business.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
It's very excitable over.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I've 6 years living in New York, and I say it's been a really interesting, again, an amazing learning curve for me about how different Americans are and then how similar we are. Yeah. And I'm South African, and I would say Americans and South Africans have a lot in common, perhaps more so than the English and the Americans do. Yeah. But it's interesting having lived here 20 odd years, and they're now 6 to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, it must be a great global sort of view. And actually, that just on I'm conscious that we need to sort of start to wrap up, and we'll be talking back to you two for a long, long time. Yeah. So I'll try and be a little bit disciplined.
Well, you can buy the pints next time. We can do that. Yeah.
There's the next plan. Yeah. But running that as well from 2 different parts of the world. Yeah. Benefit or challenge, or how do you guys manage that?
Both. Definitely, double-edged sword. Just speaking for myself, I'm of the 2 of us a bit more extroverted. Adrian's perhaps less so. So I need more people energy, but I work out of an office at my home in Brooklyn on my own. I'm the only one in the States doing this business. Yeah. Adrian sits in the office here with our team in Farringdon, so there's a different dynamic right there. But there is a real benefit to the money's in the States. Yeah. That helps. Yeah. We're working with some large American banks, arguably some of the biggest in the world. Their management are in the US and New York. That definitely helps. I get over here every 6 weeks, so to sort of feed the beast, as it were. Personally. Me meeting the beast. To be very clear, not him. He's beauty in this situation. but no, that's kind of how we make it work. But we speak every day.
We speak every day by phone. You can. Yeah. And obviously, to state the obvious, post-pandemic, working from home, working remotely, speaking on video conference, WhatsApp, whatever.
Yeah, it's become a thing.
Speak every day.
And you have the team in Farringdon on a regular basis.
The team's in Farringdon, so we're a mixture of. We've got a sort of contractor team, which is more in the dev world. Yeah. We've got some permanent dev resources as well. Yeah. But the core team works from the office at least 3 days a week. Yeah. Like all businesses, some of the young ones like to be in every day. Yeah. And some of the others, like myself, like to come in every second day.
Yeah. But it's also, again, it's intentional. It's understood we speak a lot about the expectations and what it is to work with us. Perhaps more than culture or principles. What are the expectations? And in that context, it's obviously less about where you sit and do your work and how effective your job is. What are you actually delivering, and can we see that? Can we point at that? Can we understand it? So I think having the maturity to understand how to manage a team based on outcomes and outputs rather than, you're not there to sort of police the guy's time at a desk. And it works okay. We have people in Asia working with us, me in the States, the team here, and then in Eastern Europe. South Africa. Yeah, it's very. Yes, I forgot about that actually. It is very dispersed.
I love this whole conversation, particularly around the sort of honesty that you guys have had. But if I'm to sort of encapsulate what I think has made you guys special, is that sort of clarity and maturity that you guys have put through to it. And it seems like I speak to lots of different founders who've got, everyone's got passion. You guys clearly have got passion for what you're doing, the problem you're solving, the business you're growing. But I love the fact that it's got this sort of real clarity, honesty. Everything that you're talking about there makes sense to where you're going. I love the fact you've really considered it, thought about it. And it seems obvious, right, that people should be thinking about their business and planning their business and doing all that sort of stuff. But to be thinking about things and predicting and plotting and seeing that sort of bigger picture, I don't think it's particularly common, bizarrely.
Well, I think I have a lot of, having started this journey, we've both met a lot of people in the startup space.
Yeah.
And yes, there are a lot more younger people than we are out there. And what I do notice with lots of my friends who are CEOs or senior in these businesses is the noise. There's a lot of noise in their lives around what might happen, what should happen. I think there is no doubt that there's a fortunate situation when you've done a bit more in your life that you've learned to recognize what's really important and what's not. I'm not saying we don't get it wrong, we do all the time. But we at least have a sense of knowing how to manage that conversation.
Yeah.
I was on dinner with somebody on Friday night, a very good friend of mine who's a CEO, and we were having exactly this conversation. He says, some days I wonder why you're so calm. And I said, well, because maybe, I've just been through a bit more, and I recognize that there's some things that you're worrying about that really aren't worth worrying about.
Yeah.
So
I love it. Well, listen, guys, as I said, I could be talking about this for a long, long time. It's been a great conversation, and I really do wish you guys the very, very best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
For people who are watching it back at home at the moment, what's the best way for them to find out a little bit more and get in touch with you guys?
the website, I guess, right?
www.AbbeyCross.com.
Yeah.
Easy.
We've got a LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, there's a LinkedIn, AbbeyCross. Very easy to remember.
We should be tagged in on everything as well.
Yeah.
It's been lovely having you in the studio today. Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much for your
sir.
time.
Good to speak to you.
Great to meet you in
very much.
person.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you soon on another episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.